My WIFESALPHA lover, tried TOKISS her in front of our kids. I made him regret it. Imagine the person you trust most suddenly shattering your world with a single action. That's exactly what happened to me. My wife's alpha lover tried to kiss her in front of our kids, and I made him regret it. But how did it come to this? And how far would I go to protect what's left of my family? Stay tuned as I reveal every shocking twist, every betrayal, and the moment I finally took a stand. I never thought I'd find myself in this kind of situation, not in a million years. For most of my life, I'd considered myself a simple, ordinary guy. I didn't need much to be happy. A steady job, a loving wife, 2 great kids, that was my world, and I was content with it. We had our share of ups and downs like any family, but we were solid. At least, that's what I always believed. It wasn't just the house we lived in, though I'll admit, I'd always felt a sense of pride in it. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, a 3-bedroom home on a quiet street in a typical suburban neighborhood. The kind of street where neighbors wave as they walk their dogs, where kids ride bikes after school, and where weekend barbecues are just a given. I worked a steady job in construction, long hours, sure, but it kept the lights on, kept the fridge stocked, and most importantly, it allowed me to provide for my family. My wife, Hannah, handled everything at home like a pro. She was smart, resourceful, and had this warm, radiant smile that could brighten the darkest days. I used to think she was the glue that held our family together. She had that rare kind of charisma that made people gravitate toward her. I loved that about her, that effortless charm. It was what drew me to her in the first place. Over the years, we settled into a routine that I thought was unshakable. I'd wake up early, grab a quick cup of coffee, and head out to the job site before the kids were even out of bed. Hannah would handle the morning chaos, getting Lucas ready for school, helping Ava pack her art supplies, and ensuring everyone was out the door on time. By the time I got home, usually just before dinner, I'd find the kids doing homework at the kitchen table or watching TV in the living room. Hannah would be in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour or speckled with tomato sauce. Dinner wasn't always elaborate, but it was always ready, and it was always made with care. I'd sit down, exhausted but happy, listening to the kids tell me about their day. Ava would go on about her latest drawing, or some craft project she'd seen online. Lucas would talk about his soccer practice, how he scored a goal, or how his coach gave him a compliment. They were good kids, smart, kind, and full of potential. And Hannah? She was there in the center of it all, keeping the family running like a well-oiled machine. I thought we were lucky. I thought I was lucky. But now, looking back, I can't help but wonder if I'd just been blind. There were small things I'd ignored, little details that didn't seem like much at the time. I remember nights when Hannah would stay up later than usual, her face illuminated by her phone screen. I never questioned it. We all need some downtime, I'd tell myself. She'd laugh softly at something on her phone, then brush it off when I asked. Just a meme, she'd say with a quick smile. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I trusted her. And those nights when she seemed a little quieter, a little more withdrawn, I chalked it up to the stress of the day. I'd have my own rough days at work, so I didn't think too much of it. I never pressed her. I never pried. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who questions every little thing. I thought giving her space was the right thing to do. But now I wonder, should I have asked more questions? Should I have been paying closer attention? The thing is, our life wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it was ours. I loved coming home to the sound of Lucas practicing his soccer moves in the backyard, or Ava humming to herself as she sketched on the living room floor. I loved the way the kitchen always smelled faintly of cookies, even when we hadn't baked any in weeks. I loved the way Hannah would smile at me from across the room, that kind of smile that made me think I must have done something right to deserve her. So, no, I never thought I'd find myself here questioning everything, feeling like the ground was slipping out from under me. I don't know when it started exactly, but one day, I woke up and something felt off. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just a flicker of doubt, a shadow of unease. I brushed it aside, focused on the work that needed to be done, the bills that needed to be paid, the homework that needed to be checked. Life doesn't wait for you to sort out your feelings. You just keep moving forward. At least, that's what I told myself. But that flicker grew. It was little things: Hannah taking more calls in the other room, her smile that seemed just a little too quick, her laughter that felt like it was meant for someone else. I ignored it for as long as I could. I didn't want to believe that something could be wrong. We were solid, weren't we? We were the couple that made it through everything together. We were the family everyone envied, weren't we? I thought about all those evenings spent on the back porch, watching the sunset while the kids played. The way Hannah's head would rest on my shoulder. The sound of her voice as she told me about her plans for the garden, or how Lucas was doing in school. Those moments felt real. They felt solid. And yet, there I was, doubting everything. If you had asked me a year ago if I thought our marriage was at risk, I would have laughed. I would have told you we were rock solid. I would have told you we had something special. But now I'm not so sure. I keep asking myself what changed, what went wrong, but I can't seem to find the answer. I don't know if it was something I did or something I didn't do. I don't know if it was something that happened gradually, or if it hit all at once. I just know that the life I thought I had feels like it's slipping away, and I can't seem to stop it. It all started with her phone. I didn't want to notice it at first. I mean, who was I to judge? We all spend too much time staring at screens these days. It's practically a given in this digital world. But something about the way she held it, the way she angled it away from me, subtle at first, began to bother me. I'd walk into the living room after putting the kids to bed, and there she'd be, curled up on the couch, her eyes glued to that glowing rectangle. At first, it was just memes, or so she said. It's just a stupid meme, she'd tell me with a laugh, flipping the phone screen down onto the armrest. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd always had that easy trust between us. I trusted her, she trusted me, and that's how we worked. But after a while, the laughter stopped sounding so carefree. It became softer, more intimate somehow. Not the kind of laugh she shared with me after I told a dumb joke at the dinner table. No, this was a different kind of laugh. One that felt private, not shared. One that left me standing there, in the same room, but feeling miles away. And then there were the late nights. Hannah wasn't a night owl. She was always the first to bed, the first to rise, the one who made the coffee before I even stumbled into the kitchen. But suddenly, she was staying up later, scrolling through her phone, or watching TV long after the rest of us had turned in. She'd tell me it was nothing, just unwinding after a long day. I didn't question it at first. I told myself it was fine. Everyone needs a little time to themselves, right? But then it started to feel like she wasn't just unwinding, she was unplugging. From me. From us. I'd lie in bed waiting for her, listening to the faint sound of the TV in the other room, wondering why she wasn't next to me anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping away, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to bridge the distance. At dinner, she used to ask about my day. We used to talk about everything, big and small. Now, our conversations had turned into logistics, Lucas's soccer schedule, Ava's school project deadlines, who was picking up the dry cleaning. It felt like we were ticking off boxes on a to-do list, rather than sharing our lives. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed, or tired, or just needed some space. But that nagging feeling in the back of my mind grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just her phone or her late nights, it was the way she avoided eye contact. The way she brushed off my questions with a quick smile, and a dismissive "I'm fine." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the harder I tried to ignore the signs, the more obvious they became. One night, I walked into the room unexpectedly, and caught her typing furiously on her phone. Her head shot up, startled, and she immediately pressed the screen against her chest like a teenager caught sneaking out after curfew. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just a friend from work," she said quickly, too quickly. "Nothing important." She smiled, but it was tight, forced, not the warm, easy smile I knew so well. I nodded, but that moment stayed with me. Her reaction wasn't just defensive, it was protective. And I couldn't help but wonder what, or who, she was protecting. I started to notice more little things. The way she'd lock her phone when I walked by. The way she'd laugh at a text but wouldn't share what was so funny. The way she'd make excuses to stay late at her book club, or her yoga class. Once, I found her sitting in the car in the driveway, just staring at her phone before coming inside. I tapped on the window, and she jumped so high she nearly dropped the phone. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, genuinely confused. She laughed nervously and said, "Oh, I just needed a minute to myself before coming in. You know, clear my head." I nodded, pretending to understand, but in truth, I didn't understand at all. Things escalated when she started dressing differently. She'd always had a great sense of style, but now she was putting more effort into her appearance. She bought new clothes, started wearing makeup more often, even got her hair done at a salon she'd never mentioned before. She looked beautiful, no doubt about it, but it felt different. It wasn't just for me anymore. When I told her she looked nice, she'd smile politely and say, "Thanks," without the playful, teasing banter we used to have. It felt like she was dressing for someone else. I know that sounds crazy paranoid even, but that's the feeling I couldn't shake. I started to look for answers, but I didn't know where to begin. She wasn't giving me much to go on, and every time I tried to bring it up, she'd get defensive. "You're overthinking things," she'd say with a wave of her hand. "You're just stressed from work." "We're fine, Jason. You're reading into it too much." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But my gut told me otherwise. And as the weeks went on, the tension in the house grew thicker. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing myself. Am I being too paranoid? Am I imagining things that aren't there? I started to question my own instincts, my own sanity. There were nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that we were fine, that the woman I loved, the woman I married, would never hide something from me. But that tiny voice in the back of my mind wouldn't shut up. What if you're wrong? What if everything you thought was true is a lie? I began to dread coming home, which was something I never thought I'd feel. Home was supposed to be my sanctuary, my safe place. But now, it felt like a minefield, every moment spent waiting for the next subtle sign that something was off. I hated feeling that way. I hated the doubt, the suspicion. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't stop myself from noticing every little change, every little clue that something wasn't right. And then, one evening, I saw it. Hannah was sitting on the couch, her phone glowing in the dim light. She didn't see me at first, so I stood there for a moment, watching her. Her fingers moved quickly, typing something that made her smile, a soft, almost shy smile that I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't meant for me. I knew that instantly. My heart sank as I realized that whatever or whoever was making her smile like that wasn't part of our world. It was outside, somewhere I couldn't reach. When she finally noticed me, she jumped, quickly locking her phone and placing it face down on the cushion beside her. "Hey," she said casually, as if she hadn't just been caught. "You're home early." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's so funny?" She hesitated, just for a split second, before giving me that same tight smile. "Oh, it's nothing. Just something from work." Her answer was so rehearsed, so automatic, that it only made my stomach churn. Something from work. I had heard that excuse so many times now it felt meaningless. That was the moment I knew without a doubt that things were not fine. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, to pretend everything was okay, I couldn't. Something was wrong. Something had changed. And I had no idea how to fix it. Now, I thought I knew everything, every lie, every secret. But just when I started piecing it all together, something happened that I never saw coming. What would you do if you found out there was still more hidden? How far would you go to uncover the full truth? Drop a comment below, 1 if you think I should confront her again. Or 2 if you think it's time to walk away. I'll be reading your answers. I've been carrying around that gut feeling for weeks, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and refuses to go away. It was like a rock, a solid weight pressing down on me every day, making me question everything I thought I knew. And then, one night, I finally hit a breaking point. I'd just come home from work, one of those long days, where nothing seemed to go right, and I was already on edge. Walking into the house, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. The kids were upstairs, playing in their rooms, and the house should have felt calm. But it didn't. It felt off. Hannah was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hand as usual, the faint glow of the screen lighting up her face. She didn't notice me at first. I stood there for a moment, watching her. Her expression was soft, almost serene, and I could hear her fingers tapping away. She laughed quietly. That same soft, intimate laugh I'd heard so many times before. It wasn't a laugh she shared with me anymore. My chest tightened as I walked into the room. "What's so funny?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Hannah glanced up, startled. She quickly put the phone down, face down on the cushion next to her, and gave me that same practiced smile. "Oh, just something from work," she said. That answer again, the one she always gave. But this time, it didn't sit right. I couldn't let it slide. Not again. I nodded slowly, but the rock in my chest only grew heavier. I didn't say anything more right then. Instead, I went into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and leaned against the counter. My mind was racing. I was tired of feeling like I was on the outside looking in, tired of the unease that never left me. So, that night after Hannah went to bed, I stayed up. I sat on the couch in the dark, staring at her phone still sitting there on the armrest. The screen was dark, but it might as well have been glowing, calling to me, daring me to pick it up. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be the kind of man who snoops through his wife's phone. But that voice in my head wouldn't stop. What if you're wrong? What if you're reading too much into this? What if it's nothing? But then again, what if you're right? My hand hovered over the phone, and my heart was pounding in my chest like a jackhammer. I could feel my palms sweating, my breathing uneven. I told myself I wouldn't go too far. Just a quick look. Just enough to put my mind at ease. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. The moment the screen lit up, I felt my stomach drop. At the top of her messages, pinned like it was the most important thing in her life, was one name, David. My fingers froze over the screen. David. I knew that name. He was a guy from her work, someone she'd mentioned in passing once or twice, always in a casual way. David at the office said something funny today, she'd say. Or David mentioned this great restaurant we should try. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? But now, seeing his name there, pinned above everyone else, my heart started racing. I tapped on the thread. The messages weren't anything overt at first glance. No professions of love, no plans to run away together. But the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't just friendly banter, it was personal, familiar, intimate. He made her laugh in a way I hadn't seen in years. He complimented her in ways I never thought to. "That dress you wore today, wow," he'd said in one text. Another read, "No one understands me like you do." The more I scrolled, the more my hands began to shake. I saw inside jokes, moments shared that I hadn't been part of, little fragments of their connection that felt like a knife to the gut. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to close in around me, and the only sound was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed to see it all. I kept scrolling, and the further I went, the worse it got. There was a picture he'd sent of himself at some conference, followed by her response, "Looking sharp, David." Sharp. I couldn't remember the last time she'd used a word like that to describe me. My head spun. I tried to tell myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. Maybe it was just harmless flirting. Maybe she didn't even realize how it came across. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't just a coworker she joked around with. This was someone she shared a part of herself with that I hadn't seen in years. I wanted to storm into the bedroom and confront her right then and there. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. But I didn't. I sat there, staring at that phone, my mind racing. Anger, hurt, confusion, all of it hit me at once, like a wave crashing over me. I felt like my entire world was falling apart. The life I thought I had was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I set the phone down, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring into the darkness, trying to process what I'd just seen. Every message I read played over and over in my head. The words felt like they were burned into my mind, taunting me, reminding me of the gap that had grown between us. The worst part was that it wasn't even what was said, it was what was unsaid. The feeling behind the words, the familiarity, the connection. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had been hiding something from me, or the fact that she felt the need to hide it at all. I felt like a fool. Like I'd been blind to the cracks in our marriage, like I'd ignored the warning signs until it was too late. The man I thought I was, the husband, The father, the provider, suddenly felt like a stranger. I couldn't shake the thought. What if I never really knew her at all? The clock on the wall ticked louder in the silence, each second stretching into an eternity. I sat there until the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, the phone still sitting on the armrest. Next to me, the screen dark again. But even with the phone dark, the truth I'd uncovered was seared into my memory. I knew there was no going back to the way things were. I knew that everything was about to change. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The questions, the doubts, the fear, they weren't going anywhere. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss I wasn't ready to face. But I knew I couldn't stay on that edge forever. I had to do something. I just didn't know what. The next morning, the weight of what I'd seen the night before was still pressing down on me. I'd barely slept, just laid there, staring at the ceiling, running through those messages in my head again and again. Her laughter, her compliments, the way she seemed so open, so free in her words with David. I couldn't get it out of my mind. By the time I dragged myself out of bed, I was a wreck. But I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't keep sitting in silence, pretending nothing was wrong. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready to hear them. Hannah was in the kitchen, already pouring coffee when I walked in. She turned to greet me, that same practiced smile on her face. For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. But then I remembered those messages, the ones that made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage, and I knew I couldn't let it go. "Hannah," I said, my voice tight, "we need to talk." Her smile faltered, and she set the coffee pot down a little too quickly. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "I know about David," I said bluntly. I didn't want to dance around it. I needed to lay it all out there and see how she responded. "I saw the messages." She froze. For just a second she didn't move. Then she turned to me, her face pale. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. "I had to," I said, my words coming out sharper than I intended. "You've been hiding something from me, Hannah. I know it. And I need to know what's really going on." Her eyes darted away, looking at the floor, the counter, anywhere but at me. "It's not what you think," she said. Finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Explain it to me, Hannah. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me for months." She took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping as she leaned against the counter. I don't know how to explain it," she said. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You were laughing with him, sharing inside jokes, complimenting each other like you're a couple or something. That's not complicated, Hannah. That's betrayal." "It's not like that," she said quickly, looking up at me with wide eyes. "I swear, Jason, it's not like that. I needed someone to talk to." "Someone to talk to?" I shook my head, feeling my anger boil over. "You have me. I've always been here for you. Why couldn't you talk to me?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence was deafening. Finally she said, "Because you don't understand me anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I staggered back a step, my mouth opening and closing as I tried to process what she'd just said. "I don't understand you?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "I've been by your side for years, Hannah. I've supported you, loved you, worked my ass off for this family. And you're saying I don't understand you?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but instead of softening, I felt myself getting angrier. I had given her everything, and she had gone to someone else. "So, what? David understands you?" I spat. "Is that what you're saying?" "Jason, please," she said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I felt so alone. You were always working, always distracted. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But it did." I shot back, my voice loud enough to make her flinch. "It got this far because you let it. Because you didn't talk to me. You didn't give me a chance to fix things. You just turned to him instead." Her tears spilled over, and she wiped them away quickly, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. I was too hurt, too angry. This was her fault. She did this. She broke us. Jason, she said softly, her voice trembling, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I said coldly. You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. And now I don't even know who you are anymore. Her face crumpled, and she covered her mouth with her hand, as if to hold back a sob. But I couldn't stay there and watch her cry. I couldn't look at her and see the woman I used to know. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone who had kept secrets, who had betrayed my trust, who had made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I turned away, leaving her standing there in the kitchen, her quiet sobs echoing in my ears. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how to move forward from this. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I really did, tossing and turning, staring at the clock as the hours dragged on. But my mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying everything she said, every look on her face, every pause in her voice. The image of her standing there, tearful yet defensive, still haunted me. I could hear her words echoing in my head, I never wanted to hurt you. But the truth was, she had. She'd taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of our marriage. And now I was standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. By the time the sun rose, I was already out of bed, running on fumes. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but even the caffeine didn't help. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring into the mug as if it held some kind of answer. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. When did this start? Was it something I did or didn't do that pushed her away? How long had she been feeling this way? I wanted to blame her entirely, but I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that maybe, somehow, I'd failed her. The kids woke up before Hannah came downstairs. Lucas ran into the kitchen first, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in every direction. Dad, can we have pancakes? He asked, his face lighting up at the thought. Ava followed soon after, carrying one of her sketchbooks under her arm. She gave me a quick smile before sitting at the table, flipping through her pages as if the world was still perfectly normal. I wanted to protect that sense of normalcy for them. I wanted to pretend that everything was okay, even if I felt like I was falling apart inside. Sure, buddy, I said, forcing a smile as I stood to grab the pancake mix. I moved through the motions on autopilot, flipping pancakes and listening to their chatter, all the while feeling like I was walking on thin ice. When Hannah finally came downstairs, she looked like she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me at the stove, the kids laughing at some joke Lucas had told. I could feel her watching me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't trust myself to look at her without losing my cool. Morning, she said quietly, her voice hesitant. Morning, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She moved to pour herself a cup of coffee, then sat down across from Ava. She tried to join the conversation, asking Lucas about his upcoming soccer game, complimenting Ava's latest drawing. The kids didn't notice anything was off, but I could see it. Her smile was forced, her laughter too quick. I wanted to call her out on it, to tell her to stop pretending. But I didn't. Not in front of them. I waited until after breakfast, until the kids ran off to get ready for the day, before I said anything. She was at the sink, washing the dishes, when I finally spoke. We're going to have to figure this out, I said, my voice low but firm. She didn't turn around. I know, she said softly. I don't know where to start. How about the truth? I said. No more excuses, no more deflecting. I need to know everything, Hannah. All of it. I can't keep living like this, not knowing what's real and what's not. She turned then, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, I thought I saw something there, regret, maybe. Or guilt. But just as quickly, she looked away. It's not that simple, she said. It never is it? I shot back, feeling my frustration rise again. But you need to try. You owe me that much. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned off the faucet and wiped her hands on a dish towel. I just need time. Time for what? I demanded. Time to come up with another excuse? Another way to avoid the truth? She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I was done tiptoeing around this. I was done pretending that everything was fine. Jason, please, she said, her voice cracking. I just need to think. I threw my hands up in frustration. Fine, Think, but don't expect me to just sit here and wait forever. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. The rest of the day was a blur. I threw myself into chores, mowing the lawn, fixing that broken step on the back porch, anything to keep my hands busy, to stop my mind from spiraling. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that things were only going to get worse before they got better. If they got better at all. I spent the rest of the day wandering in and out of the house, not really sure what I was doing or why. It felt like my body was moving on autopilot, picking up a hammer here, a screwdriver there, fixing little things I'd been putting off for weeks. The broken step on the porch, the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom, even a loose door hinge in the laundry room. I tackled them all, one after the other, trying to drown out the noise in my head. But the harder I worked, the louder my thoughts became. What am I even trying to accomplish? I asked myself, over and over. Am I hoping that if I fix enough things, the pieces of my marriage will somehow fall back into place? By late afternoon, the house was quiet. The kids had gone to a friend's for a sleepover, leaving just me and Hannah under the same roof. The silence was almost unbearable. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards. Every sound felt amplified, echoing through the emptiness of the house. And then there was her, upstairs in the bedroom. I could hear her moving around, opening drawers, shutting the closet door. It was all so normal, so mundane, but I knew it wasn't. Not anymore. The tension between us had stretched so thin I felt like it could snap at any moment. I wanted to go upstairs, to confront her again, to demand the answers she was still holding back. But I also knew I couldn't force it. I had tried that, and all it got me was more frustration. She wasn't ready to talk, and maybe I wasn't ready to hear the full truth. So instead, I stayed downstairs, pacing back and forth in the living room, running my hands through my hair as I tried to figure out my next move. Should I leave, give her space? Or would that just push her further away? Should I press harder, insist on a real conversation, force her to tell me what I needed to hear? The questions swirled in my head, each one more maddening than the last. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the room grew dim. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just stood at the window, staring out at the street as the neighborhood settled into its evening routine. Porch lights clicked on, a couple of kids rode their bikes up and down the sidewalk, and a dog barked in the distance. It all felt so ordinary, so detached from the chaos I was living in. After a while, I grabbed my jacket and headed outside. The cool air hit me like a slap to the face, and for a brief moment, it cleared my head. I walked down the street, not really sure where I was going, but needing to get out, needing to move. As I walked, I thought about the past. I thought about all the moments that had led us here, to this place of doubt and betrayal. When did it start? How had I missed the signs? Was it my long hours at work, my tendency to retreat into my own thoughts, instead of sharing them with her? Had I taken her for granted, assumed that she would always be there, even if I didn't put in the effort? The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the anger. She had made choices, 2 choices that had nothing to do with me, choices that had driven a wedge between us. I couldn't fix that on my own. I couldn't carry this weight alone. By the time I returned home, it was dark. The house looked the same as always from the outside, cozy, inviting, like the kind of place where a happy family lived. But stepping through the front door, I felt the heaviness settle back over me. I kicked off my shoes, hung up my jacket, and stood in the entryway for a moment, listening. Hannah was still upstairs, her movements softer now, like she was trying not to make any noise. I could picture her lying in bed, her face illuminated by the light of her phone, scrolling through messages, reading texts maybe from him. The thought made my stomach turn. I headed into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down at the table. The house was so quiet, so still, it was almost suffocating. I sat there, staring at the bottle in my hand, the condensation dripping onto the wood, and tried to summon the courage to go upstairs and face her. But every time I thought about walking into that room, about looking her in the eye, I hesitated. I didn't know what I wanted to say. I didn't know what I wanted to hear. I just knew that the longer we stayed in this limbo, the more unbearable it became. Eventually, I went upstairs. My heart was pounding in my chest, my palms sweating as I stood outside the bedroom door. I could hear her inside. the faint rustle of the blankets as she shifted on the bed. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. She looked up at me, her phone still in her hand, her expression guarded. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a mix of apprehension and exhaustion. I stood there for a moment, unsure how to start. Then I said, "We can't keep doing this, Hannah. We can't keep pretending." She set her phone down on the nightstand and looked at me, her eyes filled with a sadness that made my chest ache. "I know," she said softly. "I just don't know how to fix it." I took a step closer, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "Then we need to talk. For real. No more half answers. No more waiting. We have to figure this out, or..." I trailed off, unable to say the rest out loud. She nodded, but didn't say anything right away. For a long moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything between us heavy in the air. I felt the urge to reach for her hand, to close the gap between us, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I waited. I waited for her to say something, to open up, to give me a glimpse of the truth I'd been chasing for so long. "Jason," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." And then, just as I thought she was about to tell me everything, she stopped. Her shoulders slumped, and she looked away. "I just need a little more time." The frustration flared up in me again, but I kept it in check. "How much time, Hannah? I can't keep waiting forever." She looked back at me, her eyes filled with guilt. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying. I really am." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "I don't know if that's enough anymore," I said, my voice cracking. "I want to believe you, but I can't do this on my own." I left the room before she could respond, before I said something I couldn't take back. I didn't have the answers, and I didn't know if she did, either. All I knew was that we couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was exhausted. Not physically, I'd gotten just enough sleep to keep going, but mentally, emotionally, I was drained. My mind wouldn't stop racing, looping the same questions, the same doubts, over and over. Hannah had asked for time, but time wasn't helping. If anything, the silence between us was growing louder. Each day she spent avoiding the conversation. Each moment she deflected my questions. Was another mile of distance added to the chasm that already existed. By Saturday afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. The kids were at my parents' place for the day, something we'd planned weeks ago, so it was just me and Hannah in the house. The silence was oppressive. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards whenever one of us moved, but no conversation, no laughter, nothing. I found her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. My chest tightened at the sight of her, phone in hand again, and the anger that I'd been trying so hard to contain started to bubble up. "We need to talk," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. She glanced up at me, startled, and then quickly looked back down at her phone. "I'm not ready yet, Jason," she said quietly, her tone even. That calmness, that measured response, how could she be so composed while I felt like I was unraveling? I took a step closer, my fists clenching at my sides. "You keep saying that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I need answers, Hannah. I can't keep waiting. Not like this." She sighed, set her phone down, and rubbed her temples. "I know," she said, sounding tired. "I just don't know how to say it." "Try," I said, sitting down across from her. "Just tell me the truth. Whatever it is. I need to know." She hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle to find the right words. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "Hannah, please," I said. "I'm begging you. Just tell me." She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she was going to do it, finally open up. Finally give me the answers I'd been waiting for. But then she shook her head and looked away. "I can't," she said softly. "Not yet." My stomach dropped. I stood up, pacing the room. "Not yet? What does that even mean, Hannah?" I said, my voice rising. "How long am I supposed to wait? How long until you finally tell me what's going on?" "Jason," she said, standing up and reaching for me, but I stepped back, out of reach. "I'm trying," she said. "I really am." "Try harder," I said, my voice breaking. "Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living in this limbo. not knowing if I'm just some placeholder in your life. She flinched, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered all the late nights, the secretive smiles at her phone, the distance that had grown between us, and I didn't back down. If you can't tell me the truth, Hannah, then what's left? What are we even doing here? She looked at me, her eyes glistening, but she didn't say anything. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I shook my head and turned away. You know what? I said, my voice quiet now. If you're not ready to talk, then I'll find out myself. I didn't know exactly what I meant when I said it. I just knew I couldn't sit around waiting anymore. I needed answers, and if she wasn't going to give them to me, I'd find them some other way. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house without another word. The cool air hit me as soon as I stepped outside, a sharp contrast to the oppressive tension inside. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just needed to get out, to clear my head, to figure out my next move. I drove aimlessly for a while, the roads blurring together as I tried to make sense of everything. My thoughts were a mess, a tangled web of anger, hurt, and confusion. I thought about driving to a friend's place, someone I could talk to, someone who could help me see things more clearly. But then I realized I didn't want to talk. Not yet. I didn't want to hear anyone else's opinions, didn't want to be told what I should or shouldn't do. I just wanted to figure it out on my own. Eventually, I found myself parked at a quiet spot by the lake, a place I used to go to clear my head when things got overwhelming. The water was calm, the surface reflecting the orange and pink hues of the setting sun. I sat there for a while, the engine off, the silence soothing in a way I hadn't felt in days. I thought about what I'd just said to her if she wouldn't tell me the truth. I'd find it myself. But what did that mean? Was I really going to start digging, snooping, trying to piece together the answers? She wouldn't give me. The idea felt wrong, but the alternative, continuing to wait, continuing to live in the dark, felt unbearable. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes, letting the quiet wash over me. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. Something had to change. I had to find a way forward, with or without her. I sat there by the lake for what felt like hours, the world around me fading into the background. The quiet was almost too much, pressing down on me, forcing me to confront everything I'd been trying to avoid. I thought about Hannah, her expression when I walked out, the way she kept saying she needed more time. It was infuriating. Every time I asked for honesty, for clarity, she retreated further into herself, leaving me to piece together a puzzle without all the pieces. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We were supposed to be a team, the two of us against whatever life threw our way. But now it felt like she was on one side and I was on the other, with a wall between us that I couldn't tear down no matter how hard I tried. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. Memories came rushing in our first date, the way she'd smiled at me from across the table, the way her hand had felt when I'd held it for the first time. Back then, everything had seemed so simple, so right. I couldn't help but wonder where it had all gone wrong. Was there a moment, a single turning point, when things started to fall apart? Or was it a series of small cracks that slowly widened over time? I didn't have the answers, and that realization made me feel even more lost. I thought about the kids, two, Lucas and Ava, so innocent, so unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. They deserved better than this, better than parents who couldn't get their act together. The thought of them finding out, of them feeling the tension, made my chest tighten. I needed to fix this, not just for me, but for them. When I finally opened my eyes, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shades of gray and blue. The air was cooler now, a chill creeping in through the window. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head, and started the car. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't sit there all night. I needed a plan, a way to move forward. As I drove back home, the road stretched out before me like a path I didn't want to take. The house came into view, its lights glowing softly in the darkness. It looked so peaceful from the outside, like nothing was wrong. But I knew better. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, gathering myself before going in. Inside, it was quiet. I could hear the faint sound of the TV coming from the living room. Hannah was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes on the screen but not really watching. She glanced up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she said softly, her voice hesitant. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to say next. Finally, I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. I leaned against the counter, taking a sip, and waited for her to say something. When she didn't, I set the bottle down and looked at her. "Hannah," the first started, my voice calm but firm. "I can't keep doing this. We can't keep dancing around the issue." She sighed, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me what's really going on. No more excuses, no more delays. Just tell me the truth." She didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed on the TV, but I could see her hands gripping the edge of the blanket. "It's not that simple," she said finally. "Why not?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Why can't you just tell me what's going on? I deserve to know. Don't you think I've earned that much?" She finally turned to look at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Jason," she said, her voice shaking, "I don't know if you'll understand." "Try me," I said, my frustration bubbling over. "Because right now, I'm standing here, willing to listen, willing to fight for us, and you're giving me nothing. I'm not asking for perfect answers, Hannah. I'm asking for the truth." She wiped at her eyes, her hand trembling. I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't want to lose everything we've built. I don't want to hurt you more than I already have." I took a step back, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. "You're scared?" I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. "Do you think I'm not scared? Do you think I don't feel like I'm losing everything? You've been pulling away from me for months, Hannah. You've been shutting me out, and I don't even know why. I can't do this anymore. I need to know what's really going on." She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I waited, hoping she would finally let it all out, hoping she would tell me what I needed to hear. But she didn't. She just sat there, looking at me with tears in her eyes, and said nothing. I shook my head, the anger and frustration boiling over. "You keep saying you're scared, but you're not doing anything to fix it," I said, my voice breaking. "If you're not willing to be honest with me, then what are we even doing here?" Her shoulders slumped, and she looked down at her hands. "I'm trying, Jason," she said softly. "I'm trying." "Not hard enough," I replied, my voice cold. I turned away and headed for the stairs. "When you're ready to tell me the truth, let me know. Until then, I can't keep having this conversation." I didn't wait for her response. I went upstairs and shut the door behind me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, and tried to calm the storm inside me. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know if she would ever be ready to tell me the truth. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in limbo. I needed answers. I needed clarity. And if she couldn't give me that, I didn't know if we had anything left. After all that had happened, after all the fights and the silences, and the nights spent staring at the ceiling, I still didn't want to believe it was over. Even after everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard, I wanted to cling to the hope that we could find a way back to the life we'd built. But hope is a funny thing. It doesn't always fade when it should. Sometimes it lingers, stubborn and persistent, even when all evidence says you should let it go. And that's exactly where I found myself, caught between the life I wanted to salvage and the truth I couldn't ignore. I tried to stay busy. I tried to focus on the kids, to keep things as normal as possible for Lucas and Ava. Every morning, I'd get up and make their breakfasts, pack their lunches, and drive them to school. I'd ask them about their classes, their friends, their hobbies. I'd cheer them on at soccer games and marvel at AVA's latest sketches. But no matter how much I tried to keep my attention on them, the cracks in my own life kept bleeding through. I could see it in their eyes, the way they looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. They knew something was wrong. They could sense it, even if they didn't know the details. Hannah and I barely spoke. When we did, it was only about the kids, or the bills, or some mundane detail of running the household. The conversations that used to come so easily about our dreams, our plans, even just the silly little things that made us laugh were gone. I missed that. I missed her. But the distance between us had grown so wide, I didn't know how to reach her anymore. She was there in the same room, but she felt a million miles away. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at the TV, without really watching it. I could hear Hannah upstairs, moving around quietly, as if she were trying not to disturb me. It was almost comical. How polite we'd become. We were like strangers living under the same roof, careful not to upset the fragile balance of our coexistence. But polite wasn't what I wanted. I wanted answers. I wanted honesty. I wanted to know if there was still something worth fighting for, or if I was just fooling myself. As I sat there, I thought about the man I'd been when we first got married. I thought about how full of hope I'd been. How certain I was that we'd have a long, happy life together. I thought about the promises we'd made, the plans we'd shared, the love we'd built. And then I thought about the lies, the betrayal, the crushing weight of uncertainty. It was like looking at two different lives. Two different people. I hardly recognized the man I'd become. And I didn't recognize the woman upstairs. The love we'd shared was still there, buried deep beneath the pain and the anger. But it felt like it belonged to someone else. It felt like it was from another time, another world. I took another sip of whiskey, the burn in my throat grounding me for a moment. I'd been avoiding this for too long, this moment of clarity, this confrontation with the truth. I couldn't keep pretending that time would fix everything, that Hannah would suddenly open up and tell me what I needed to hear. She wasn't ready, and I wasn't sure she ever would be. So what was I waiting for? Why was I still here, clinging to the past, when the future seemed so uncertain? The realization hit me slowly, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for her to tell me the truth. Maybe it was about me finding my own. I'd spent so much time trying to fix something that was beyond repair, so much energy trying to hold on to a life that no longer existed. Maybe it was time to stop waiting. Maybe it was time to take a step forward, even if it meant leaving behind the life I'd known. Even if it meant starting over. The thought terrified me. It wasn't just about the house, or the marriage, or the plans we'd made. It was about the identity I'd built around being her husband, about the future I'd imagined for us and our kids. Letting go felt like giving up. It felt like failure. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that holding on to something that was already gone wasn't strength, it was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being alone. Fear of admitting that sometimes love isn't enough. As the night wore on, the decision became clearer. I didn't know what the future would look like, or how I would navigate it. I didn't know how I'd explain it to the kids, or how I'd deal with the pain of walking away. But I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't keep waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. If I wanted to find peace, if I wanted to be the kind of father my kids deserved, I had to let go of the past. I had to let go of Hannah. It wasn't an easy decision. It still isn't. Some days, I wake up and wonder if I made the right choice. I think about the good times, the love we shared, and I feel the ache of what's been lost. But then I remind myself that holding on to something that no longer exists only prolongs the pain. I remind myself that by letting go, I'm giving myself and my kids a chance to heal, a chance to rebuild. And slowly, day by day, I'm learning to embrace that. I'm learning to find strength in the act of moving forward. The process is messy, it's full of uncertainty and doubt, but it's also full of moments of clarity, moments of quiet strength, moments when I can see the future stretching out before me, waiting to be written. I don't know what that future will look like, but I know I have the power to shape it. And for the first time in a long time, that thought doesn't scare me. It gives me hope. After everything, after every lie and betrayal, I had to make a choice. You won't believe how it all ended. Do you think I forgave her? Do you think I walked away for good? The final twist left me questioning everything I thought I knew. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Would you have made the same decision I did? Don't forget to like and share if you were just as shocked as I was. And stay tuned, because this story isn't over. No matter how hard we try to cling to something that's broken, sometimes the best choice is to let go. It's not about giving up, it's about accepting the truth, learning from it, and finding the strength to move forward. Life will never be perfect, but we can build something better from the ashes if we're willing to take that first step. For all of us here in America, the lesson is clear. Don't let fear of the unknown trap you in the past. Face the truth, embrace the change, and trust that you have the strength to rebuild.